Darius Thompson clutched his boarding pass as flight attendant Kendra Hayes towered over him, her voice cutting through the cabin. "Sir, we need this seat for another passenger." The first-class cabin fell silent. Darius, CEO of Pinnacle Investments, had just closed a $120 million deal with Sky West Airlines, the very airline now demanding he move to economy. As security approached, their hands hovering near their tasers, Darius's phone buzzed with a notification. The first payment of $25 million had just cleared. With ice in his veins, he pressed transaction reversed. Before we dive into this shocking story of racial discrimination and corporate power, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and holding corporations accountable, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more true stories of courage in the face of prejudice. Darius Thompson straightened his custom Armani tie as he settled into seat 2A of Sky West Airlines flight 1876. At 42, the Harvard Business School graduate had transformed himself from a South Chicago housing project kid into one of the few black CEOs in America's financial sector. His company, Pinnacle Investments, managed assets worth billions. But today's meeting would be his biggest yet. For months, Darius had studied Sky West's financials, identified their weaknesses, and crafted a proposal to inject $120 million that would revolutionize their aging fleet. He'd booked this premium first-class ticket weeks ago, wanting to review his presentation during the 3-hour flight to Sky West's headquarters. As passengers continued boarding, Darius pulled out his tablet, scrolling through his meticulously prepared slides one last time. Each graphic told the story of Sky West's potential future with Pinnacle's backing. He'd rehearsed his pitch countless times, anticipating every possible question. The flight attendant, Kendra Hayes, approached his row. "Boarding pass, sir?" she asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Darius handed it over. "Good morning." Kendra studied it longer than seemed necessary. "And your name is?" "Darius Thompson." He maintained his professional demeanor, though he noticed the white businessman across the aisle hadn't been questioned. "And you're sure this is your seat?" Her tone carried a hint of skepticism. "Yes, I'm certain." Darius pulled out his phone, showing the digital confirmation. Kendra forced a smile. "Very well, sir." She moved on without offering the pre-flight drink she'd served to other first-class passengers. What Darius couldn't see was happening in the galley. Preston Caldwell, Sky West's vice president of operations, had boarded early and pulled Kendra aside. "We have a VIP boarding later who will need accommodation," Preston had whispered, subtly nodding toward Darius's seat. "That passenger in 2A, make sure you verify his credentials thoroughly." Preston Caldwell represented old money and older thinking. His family had been in aviation since commercial flights began, and he viewed Sky West as his birthright. The prospect of a black-owned investment firm gaining influence over his airline made his jaw clench. He'd initially tried blocking the meeting altogether, but the company's desperate need for capital had overruled his objections. Darius noticed another flight attendant approach his row again. "Excuse me, sir. May I see your boarding pass one more time?" System shows some confusion. Darius maintained his composure, though he'd been flying first class for 15 years without ever facing such scrutiny. "Certainly," he said, presenting it again. The attendant studied it, then reluctantly nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson." Across the cabin, Preston smirked as he texted Vaughn Harlan, his longtime golf buddy. "Delayed, but on my way. Got you covered." In the terminal, Vaughn Harlan fumed at the gate agent. "What do you mean I'm in economy? I always fly first class." "I'm sorry, Mr. Harlan, but today's flight is completely full in first class." Vaughn's face reddened. "Get Preston on the phone now." Darius observed these interactions while appearing absorbed in his tablet. Growing up on Chicago's South Side had taught him to stay aware of his surroundings. His single mother had worked 3 jobs to keep their apartment, sacrificing everything for his education. "They'll try to make you invisible." She'd always told him, "Don't you ever let them." He'd faced skepticism at every step, from his high school counselor who suggested trade school instead of college applications, to Harvard classmates who assumed he was there on affirmative action despite his perfect SAT scores to the bank that denied his first business loan despite an impeccable business plan. Each time Darius had responded the same way: excellence and persistence. He'd graduated top of his class, built Pinnacle from scratch, earned the respect of Wall Street's most critical players. His company now employed over 200 people, 40% of whom were minorities he'd personally mentored. Today's Sky West deal would be Pinnacle's largest ever, positioning them as major players in airline financing. The contract was practically signed, just needing the final handshakes at headquarters. Darius had arranged for the first installment of $25 million to clear immediately after digital signatures, showing Sky West his commitment. Kendra approached again. "Can I get you a beverage before takeoff, sir?" Her tone was noticeably colder than when addressing other passengers. "Water, please," Darius replied, maintaining professionalism despite the apparent microaggression. When she returned with a plastic cup, instead of the glass tumblers other first-class passengers received, Darius simply thanked her, refusing to be provoked. The cabin filled quickly. Darius noticed several passengers glancing his way, then quickly averting their eyes. He'd experienced this throughout his career, the subtle questioning of whether he belonged in premium spaces. His phone buzzed with a text from his executive assistant. Sky West execs confirmed for 2 p.m. CEO, sending car to airport. Darius smiled. Soon, none of these small indignities would matter. The deal would change everything, not just for Pinnacle, but potentially for an entire industry where diversity remained abysmal. As the final boarding announcement sounded, Darius noticed Preston Caldwell watching him from the galley, whispering something to Kendra while gesturing subtly toward seat 2A. She nodded and approached Darius once more. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with your seat assignment," she began, her voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. Darius felt his stomach tighten. He recognized this tactic, creating a public spectacle to force compliance through humiliation. It had happened to him before at restaurants, hotels, and exclusive clubs, but never on a plane bound for a meeting where he was about to become one of the company's largest investors. "There's no problem with my seat assignment," Darius replied calmly, removing his boarding pass again. "Seat 2A confirmed weeks ago." Kendra's smile thinned. "I'll need to check with my supervisor." As she walked away, Darius noticed Vaughn Harlan finally boarding, his face flushed with entitlement as he paused at the galley to speak with Preston. Both men glanced toward Darius, not bothering to hide their contempt. In that moment, Darius knew exactly what was coming. He'd experienced variations of this scene throughout his life. The only difference was the setting. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't lose sight of why he was on this plane. He hadn't fought his way from South Chicago to Harvard to the boardrooms of Wall Street to be defeated by such blatant prejudice. Little did Preston Caldwell know he was about to turn one of Pinnacle's greatest investors into his company's most dangerous adversary. Vaughn Harlan stormed down the aisle of the first-class cabin, designer briefcase swinging dangerously close to other passengers. His tailored suit couldn't mask the redness of his face as he spotted the last remaining seat in economy class. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he snarled at Kendra. "Do you know who I am?" Kendra lowered her voice. "Mr. Harlan, I understand. Mr. Caldwell is aware of the situation. Well, he better fix it." Vaughn snapped loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I don't fly coach, period." Darius observed the commotion while reviewing his presentation, noting how the flight crew scrambled to placate the irate passenger. He'd seen this behavior countless times, entitlement masquerading as importance. Preston emerged from the galley, clasping Vaughn's shoulder. "Slight misunderstanding, Vaughn. We'll sort it out." He shot a pointed look toward Darius, then whispered something to Kendra. With practiced precision, Kendra approached Darius, her smile professional but cold. "Sir, we have a situation with a VIP passenger who needs this particular seat. We can accommodate you in our economy section with a voucher for future travel." "I booked this seat weeks ago," Darius replied evenly, "and I need to work during this flight." Kendra's smile tightened. "I understand, but we're asking for your cooperation. May I ask why this particular seat is needed when there are other first-class seats available?" Darius gestured to empty 3C. Vaughn Harlan stepped forward, voice dripping with disdain. "Because some of us actually belong in first class." The implication was unmistakable. The cabin fell silent. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. "I belong exactly where my boarding pass says I belong," Darius responded, keeping his voice measured despite the open disrespect. The flight supervisor appeared next to Kendra. "Is there a problem here?" Before Darius could respond, Vaughn interjected. "Yes, I need my regular seat, and this gentleman is being difficult." "I see," the supervisor said, barely glancing at Darius's boarding pass. "Sir, we need to request that you relocate to accommodate our priority passenger." "Priority passenger?" Darius raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware airlines still categorize passengers beyond their ticketed class." Preston stepped forward. "Sir, we can make this difficult or simple. Your choice." Darius recognized the threat behind those words. "I'd like to speak with the captain." "The captain is preparing for takeoff," the supervisor replied curtly. "This is a security matter now." "Security?" Darius kept his voice level. "How exactly is my sitting in the seat I purchased a security issue?" As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared at the front of the cabin. Their hands rested casually near their tasers, a detail not lost on Darius. "Final call, sir," Preston said with thinly veiled satisfaction. "Move voluntarily, or we'll have you removed." Darius weighed his options. He could stand his ground and likely be forcibly removed, possibly arrested on manufactured charges of interfering with flight crew, a federal offense that could derail the entire deal. Or he could swallow this injustice and live to fight another day. With decades of experience navigating such moments, Darius made his choice. "I'll relocate under protest," he said, gathering his briefcase, "and I'll need your names and employee IDs. Just be grateful we're still letting you fly," Vaughn muttered, already settling into the contested seat. As Darius stood, he noticed several passengers recording with their phones. The humiliation was being documented in real time. One of the security officers stepped closer, hand still near his taser. "Let's move along, sir." With dignity intact but pride wounded, Darius walked through the first-class cabin toward economy. As he passed Preston, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, Darius saw not just prejudice, but fear. Fear of changing power structures, fear of diversity in spaces long reserved for people who looked like Preston. Has something like this ever happened to you or someone you know? Comment number 1. If you believe what they did to Darius was blatant discrimination, hit that like button. If you think companies should be held accountable for how they treat all customers, subscribe to see how Darius turns the tables on Sky West Airlines. What would you do if you were Darius? Stay calm and plan your revenge, or make a scene right there on the plane. The airline has no idea who they're messing with. But what will Darius do next with $120 million hanging in the balance? Darius Thompson navigated the narrow economy class aisle, acutely aware of every eye on him. Whispers followed his progress. What did he do? Was he threatening someone? They never remove people from first class. The walk felt interminable. Each step reinforced the message Preston Caldwell had sent. No matter his accomplishments, his wealth, or his influence, Darius would always be seen as someone who didn't belong in certain spaces. He finally reached row 34, where a middle seat awaited between two already seated passengers. Both looked up with visible discomfort as the flight attendant pointed to his new assignment. "Excuse me," Darius said politely, squeezing past the passenger in the aisle seat, a heavy-set man who made minimal effort to move. Once seated, Darius found himself wedged between the man and a woman who immediately pressed herself against the window, creating as much distance as possible. His knees pressed painfully against the seat in front, his elbows forced against his sides. From first class to this, the symbolism wasn't lost on him. He reached for the overhead air vent, only to find it broken. The cabin temperature already felt 10 degrees warmer than first class. Darius loosened his tie slightly, refusing to show his discomfort. A different flight attendant passed by, studiously avoiding eye contact. When Darius pressed the call button 20 minutes later, no one responded. "They're usually pretty slow back here," the man beside him commented, not unkindly. Darius nodded, then attempted to extract his tablet from his briefcase. The confined space made even this simple task nearly impossible. When he finally succeeded, he discovered the in-flight Wi-Fi signal was significantly weaker in economy. Too weak to download the latest market figures he needed for his presentation. Halfway through the flight, Darius asked for water. The flight attendant returned with a half-filled plastic cup, sloshing some onto his tablet before hurrying away without apology. As Darius dabbed at his device with a napkin, a notification appeared on his phone. "Luggage alert. Itinerary change detected." He tapped the notification, revealing that his checked bag containing his backup presentation materials, contract copies, and change of clothes for the meeting had been rerouted to Minneapolis. No explanation provided. This was no coincidence. Preston Caldwell was sending a message, or rather a warning. Darius took a slow breath, remembering his mother's words. "When they go low, you document everything." Discreetly, he began recording voice memos on his phone, noting times, names, and specific actions. He'd learned long ago that in America, justice often required evidence, especially for someone who looked like him. As he documented the events, Darius noticed a passenger across the aisle surreptitiously recording video. Their eyes met briefly, and the passenger gave an almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. The beverage service came and went. Every passenger around Darius received a full can of soda or juice. He received another half-filled cup of water. "Excuse me," Darius called as the attendant started to move away. "Could I please have the rest of the water?" The flight attendant turned back with visible annoyance. "This is all we have available for now, sir." The man beside Darius frowned. "You just gave that gentleman a full can of Coke," he pointed out, gesturing to another passenger. "I can come back later if we have extra," the attendant replied curtly before moving on. An hour into the flight, Darius overheard a conversation between two flight attendants in the nearby galley. "Caldwell said to make sure he doesn't get comfortable," one whispered. "I don't get it. Why is Preston so worked up over this guy? Apparently he's some hotshot investor. Preston says he's trying to take over the airline." "That guy? You're kidding. Caldwell and Harlan go way back. Country club buddies. Harlan always gets the royal treatment." Darius recorded this exchange too, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about power, territory, and a deep-seated fear of change. He checked his phone again and noticed something unexpected. The video of his removal from first class had already been uploaded to social media. The hashtag #BlackCEO removed was trending with thousands of shares in just 30 minutes. One post read, "Disgusting treatment of black executive on Sky West Air removed from first class to make room for white passenger. Black CEO removed." Another showed he had the boarding pass for that seat. Security called because he checks notes sat in the seat he paid for. Black CEO removed. The comments were flooding in by the minute. Some passengers on the very same flight were posting their own angles of the incident. Darius watched with mixed emotions as his humiliation became a viral moment. On one hand, the public exposure might force accountability. On the other, he'd spent his entire career avoiding being reduced to nothing more than his race. He'd wanted to be known for his investment acumen, his business strategies, his mentorship, not as a victim of discrimination. But as his mother had always said, sometimes the spotlight finds you for reasons you didn't choose. What matters is what you do when it does. His phone buzzed with messages from Pinnacle's executive team, who'd already seen the videos. "Are you okay? Do you need legal intervention? Should we cancel the Sky West meeting?" Darius replied simply, "Proceeding as planned. We'll explain later." He glanced toward the front of the plane where Preston Caldwell was visible, laughing with Von Harlan over champagne. They had no idea that their actions had just been broadcast to millions. The plane began its descent. Darius prepared himself mentally for the meeting ahead. He would need to compartmentalize this humiliation to present himself as the consummate professional, despite arriving without his materials in a wrinkled suit and with the entire internet discussing his public degradation. Yet beneath his composed exterior, something had shifted. Darius had built his career on strategic investments, on identifying opportunities where others saw only obstacles. And Preston Caldwell had just made a catastrophic investment mistake. He'd assumed Darius's dignity was a price worth paying for Harlan's comfort. By the time the plane touched down, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Sky West's social media team was frantically posting a generic apology about investigating the incident, but it was too late. The damage was already spiraling beyond their control. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Darius remained seated, allowing the rush of passengers to subside. He didn't want to squeeze past anyone else today. He'd had enough of making himself smaller to accommodate others. The sleek Sky West corporate headquarters rose 38 stories above downtown, its glass facade reflecting clouds and blue sky, a building designed to embody flight itself. Darius Thompson emerged from his rideshare, straightening his suit jacket. Despite the flight's indignities, he'd managed to freshen up in the airport restroom, maintaining the impeccable appearance that had become part of his professional armor. 2 security guards stood at the lobby entrance, their eyes tracking Darius as he approached. He'd anticipated this moment, prepared for it with the same thoroughness he brought to every aspect of his career. "Good afternoon." Darius greeted them confidently. I have a 2 o'clock meeting with the executive team. The guards exchanged glances. Name? One asked, skepticism evident. Darius Thompson, CEO of Pinnacle Investments. The guard examined his tablet, then looked up with narrowed eyes. There's a Mr. Thompson expected, but he hesitated. Darius understood the unspoken words. But not someone who looks like you. I can provide identification, Darius offered calmly, retrieving his driver's license and business card. The guard studied both, comparing the license photo to Darius's face with unnecessary scrutiny. Wait here, please. He stepped away to make a call. Darius maintained his composed stance, aware of the second guard watching him closely, hand resting near his weapon. This scene had played out countless times throughout his career, the presumption of not belonging, of being an imposter. In the polished marble floor, Darius caught his reflection. A successful black man in a tailored suit, whose Harvard degree, billions in managed assets, and corner office on Wall Street still couldn't guarantee he'd be treated with basic dignity. The first guard returned, his expression tense. Sir, there seems to be some confusion. The Darius Thompson we're expecting is the CEO handling the major investment. Yes, that's correct. I am that Darius Thompson. I'll need to escalate this, the guard replied, lifting his radio again. A receptionist approached, her smile tight. Sir, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. The Darius Thompson we're expecting is a Harvard MBA with 20 years in investment banking, currently CEO of Pinnacle Investments, here to finalize $120 million deal with Sky West Airlines. Darius completed her sentence, his voice level but firm. That Darius Thompson is standing right in front of you. The receptionist's smile faltered. One moment, please. She retreated to her desk and made a call, speaking in hushed tones while repeatedly glancing toward Darius. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Other visitors entered, were verified, and proceeded to elevators without delay. Darius remained in the lobby, the subject of curious stares and whispers. Finally, the receptionist returned with the security supervisor. Mr. Thompson, we've been unable to verify your appointment. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Darius took a measured breath. Please call Harlan Voss, Sky West's CEO. Tell him Darius Thompson is in the lobby. Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we'll need to contact the authorities, the supervisor warned. By all means, Darius replied. Please do call them. I'd be happy to explain how Sky West is blocking their largest potential investor from a meeting confirmed weeks ago. The receptionist's eyes widened at his calm confidence. She whispered something to the supervisor, who reluctantly made another call. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened, revealing Harlan Voss himself, Sky West's silver-haired CEO, flanked by 2 board members. His face showed confusion, then recognition, followed by horrified understanding as he connected the dots between the viral video he'd likely just been briefed about and the man standing in his lobby. Mr. Thompson, Voss hurried forward, hand extended. I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. We've been expecting you. Behind Voss, Preston Caldwell emerged from the same elevator, his face paling as he recognized Darius. Preston quickly composed himself, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Darius Thompson. Preston stepped forward. What an unexpected situation. We received word of some disturbance on your flight, but never imagined. No disturbance at all, Darius replied smoothly. Just an interesting seating reassignment. I'm sure the millions of people who viewed the video online would be fascinated by your perspective on it. Voss's head snapped toward Preston. Alarm evident. Video? What video? Darius retrieved his phone, displaying the trending hashtag and view count, now approaching 5 million. Voss's complexion turned ashen. Perhaps we should proceed to our meeting, Voss suggested, gesturing toward the elevator. We have a conference room prepared. The executive suite on the 38th floor offered panoramic views of the city. Voss led Darius to a plush boardroom where the entire executive team waited along with their legal counsel. Nervous glances bounced around the table as Darius took his seat. Before we begin, Voss started, I want to personally address what happened on your flight. It appears there was a serious breakdown in our customer service protocols, Preston interjected smoothly. A terrible misunderstanding. The flight attendant misinterpreted standard procedures for accommodating passengers with special needs. Special needs? Darius raised an eyebrow. The passenger who took my seat appeared perfectly able-bodied. In fact, he seemed particularly nimble when reaching for the champagne you served him, Mr. Caldwell. Preston's confident facade cracked slightly. You misunderstood. Von Harlan is a long-standing platinum member with claustrophobia. We were simply discriminating based on race, Darius completed calmly. But that's not why I'm here today. Voss seized the opportunity to redirect. Exactly. We're here to finalize our partnership. Your team at Pinnacle has put together an impressive proposal, and we're eager to move forward with the $120 million capital injection. The meeting proceeded with presentations from Sky West's CFO detailing how Darius's investment would transform their aging fleet, expand routes, and stabilize their rocky finances. Throughout, Darius remained engaged and professional, asking incisive questions that demonstrated his deep understanding of their business. By the meeting's end, digital signatures had been applied to the preliminary agreement. Darius would provide the initial $25 million immediately, with the remaining $95 million to follow upon finalization of terms. Voss beamed as he shook Darius's hand. This marks a turning point for Sky West. We're thrilled to welcome Pinnacle as our newest investment partner. Darius smiled. Before I leave, there's something I should mention. The room fell silent. The passenger you removed from first class today to accommodate Mr. Harlan. That was me. Voss's smile collapsed. The legal counsel visibly flinched. Several executives exchanged alarmed glances. I was on Sky West Flight 1876 this morning, seated in 2A, a seat I had reserved weeks ago. I was forcibly relocated to make room for Von Harlan, apparently on Mr. Caldwell's instructions. All eyes turned to Preston, who struggled to maintain composure. That's a gross mischaracterization. The flight attendant made an independent decision based on what exactly? Darius asked quietly. My appearance, because the flight attendants were quite clear about receiving your specific instructions. Preston's face reddened. That's absolutely false. This is clearly an attempt to leverage a minor customer service issue for financial advantage. Darius turned to Voss. The video has now been viewed 8 million times. Your company's stock has dropped 4% since market open. Would you still characterize this as minor? Voss glared at Preston before addressing Darius. Mr. Thompson, I assure you this incident does not reflect Sky West's values. We will conduct a thorough investigation. I'm glad to hear that, Darius replied, rising from his seat. Because before the remaining $95 million changes hands, I'll need to see concrete evidence that Sky West takes discrimination seriously. As Darius turned to leave, Preston called after him. This is unprofessional. You're mixing personal grievances with business. Darius paused at the door. Mr. Caldwell, when you had me removed from my seat this morning, You weren't seeing a CEO or an investor. You saw only the color of my skin and decided I didn't belong. That wasn't personal, it was structural. And addressing structural problems is very much my business." With that, Darius departed, leaving a stunned boardroom behind him. As the elevator descended, he received a notification confirming the $25 million transfer had completed. For now, he would let that payment stand. The real leverage was yet to come. The hotel suite door closed behind Darius with a soft click. Only then, in complete privacy, did he finally allow his shoulders to slump. The mask of calm confidence he'd maintained throughout the day cracked as he sank onto the edge of the bed, hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline ebbed. For several minutes, he sat motionless, processing the day's events. Then, with deliberate movements, he removed his tie, walked to the minibar, and poured 3 fingers of bourbon. The amber liquid burned pleasantly as he took a long sip. His phone continued buzzing with notifications, journalists requesting comments, social media mentions multiplying by the minute, messages from friends and colleagues who'd recognized him in the viral video. Darius silenced them all. Instead, he moved to the window overlooking the city skyline. Memories flooded back unbidden. His mother walking him past exclusive restaurants in downtown Chicago, telling him, "Someday, Darius, you'll eat wherever you want, and nobody will tell you that you don't belong." His first internship at Goldman Sachs, where a senior partner had mistaken him for janitorial staff. The countless times he'd been followed in high-end stores, the taxi drivers who'd passed him by to pick up white passengers. Each incident had been filed away, compartmentalized. Each had fueled his determination to succeed in spaces where people who looked like him were rarities. But today's public humiliation had torn open old wounds. Darius finished his drink and dialed a familiar number. "I saw the video," Dr. Terrence Hayes answered without preamble. "You okay, son?" Terrence had been Darius's mentor since Harvard, one of the few black finance professors there in the early 2000s. Now in his 70s, Terrence remained Darius's most trusted advisor. "I'm managing," Darius replied. "But Sky West just made a critical mistake." "You still planning to invest?" "That depends on what happens next," Darius said. "I'm trying to decide whether to walk away or use this as leverage for systemic change. They're expecting you to be so grateful for their money that you'll swallow this insult," Terrence observed. "What they don't understand is that you've been swallowing these insults your entire career." "Exactly. But I'm thinking bigger than just an apology or sensitivity training." "Good, because this has created an opportunity." Darius nodded, though Terrence couldn't see him. "The optics are catastrophic for them. Stock down 6% at closing. Boycott calls trending. What's your play?" Darius outlined his emerging strategy, refining it as he talked through the possibilities. Terrence asked pointed questions, exposing potential weaknesses, suggesting refinements. As they spoke, Darius opened his laptop, reviewing the viral video for the first time. The footage was damning. His calm dignity contrasted sharply with the aggressive entitlement displayed by Von Harlan and the thinly veiled threats from security. What struck him most was how familiar the scene looked to millions of viewers. The comments revealed a collective recognition. Every black professional has experienced some version of this. They did this to the wrong one this time. Watch how they'll try to paint him as the aggressor. Sky West PR team had posted a generic statement. "We're investigating the incident and take all customer concerns seriously." The response was being ratioed into oblivion with thousands of angry replies. After ending his call with Terrence, Darius contacted his executive team at Pinnacle, conferencing in his chief operating officer, Nia Patel, and general counsel Kai Leung. "I've seen healthier dumpster fires," Nia remarked after summarizing the social media situation. "Their stock is in free fall. 3 major corporate clients have already announced they're reviewing their Sky West contracts." "What's our exposure if we pull out?" Darius asked. Kai replied, "The agreement has a standard force majeure clause we could potentially invoke. Reputational damage this severe wasn't contemplated when we drafted the terms. We've transferred the initial $25 million, Darius noted. "I want to freeze it immediately." "Consider it done," Nia confirmed. "But Darius, are you sure? This deal has been your focus for months." "This isn't about the deal anymore," Darius explained. "It's about accountability. Preston Caldwell has a history we need to investigate." Darius tasked his team with discreet research into Preston's past. Within hours, they'd uncovered 5 prior discrimination complaints against him, all quietly settled. Former employees reported a pattern of hostile behavior toward minorities in leadership positions. "He's been protected by the old boys network," Kai concluded. "Harlan Voss has apparently been cleaning up Preston's messes for years." As midnight approached, Darius formulated a detailed strategy. He would use this moment not just for personal vindication, but to force structural change within an industry where discrimination remained commonplace. He drafted specific demands: a complete overhaul of Sky West's hiring and promotion practices, mandatory bias training with measurable outcomes, a diverse board expansion, and Preston Caldwell's removal. Finally, Darius called his bank and issued a critical instruction. "Place a complete freeze on the $25 million transfer to Sky West Airlines. Cite suspected fraudulent transaction. Is that your VP of Operations publicly? Is that your VP of Operations publicly humiliated me based on my race, endangered my physical safety by involving armed security, and deliberately sabotaged my luggage, all while I was en route to provide your company with $120 million. "Darius, I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset, Harlan. I'm calculating exactly how much institutional racism costs, both for its victims and for those who perpetuate it." The line went silent for several seconds. When Voss spoke again, his tone had changed. "What do you want?" "Justice," Darius answered simply. "And accountability. My team will send specific terms tomorrow." After ending the call, Darius stood at the window again, looking out at the city lights. For the first time since the incident, he felt centered, in control. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to decide between walking away or fighting back? Comment number 1: if you believe Darius is right to use his financial power to demand accountability. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up against discrimination in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to see how Sky West responds to Darius freezing their $25 million. What would you do in Darius' position? Would you pull your investment completely or use it as leverage for change? And what do you think Preston Caldwell will do now that his actions have cost his company millions? The battle is just beginning. By morning, Sky West stock had plummeted 12%. CNBC ran the headline, "Discrimination Incident Costs Airline $400 million in Market Value Overnight." Financial analysts questioned the company's culture and leadership. Several major corporate clients had publicly suspended their travel contracts pending investigation. Darius watched from his hotel room as Harlan Voss held an emergency press conference, promising a thorough internal review and appropriate action. Preston Caldwell stood behind him, face carefully composed into an expression of corporate concern. "We at Sky West have always valued diversity," Voss declared, reading from a prepared statement. This unfortunate misunderstanding does not reflect our company values. Darius's phone rang, his media liaison. Good morning, sir. We've received interview requests from 63 news outlets, including all major networks. Decline them all for now, Darius instructed. Let's see how Sky West responds to our terms first. His email pinged with a confidential communication from Voss. Darius, I've reviewed your demands. The bias training and hiring practice revisions are reasonable. However, removing Preston Caldwell is simply not feasible. He's been with the company 30 years and has significant board support. Can we discuss alternatives? Darius didn't bother responding. The terms weren't negotiable. Meanwhile, Preston Caldwell was orchestrating his counteroffensive. In his corner office on the 36th floor, he convened a crisis meeting with Sky West's most influential board members and his personal allies in the industry. This is a calculated attack, Preston insisted, pacing behind his desk. Thompson planned this from the beginning. Book a first-class seat, create an incident, then use it to extort concessions. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. Vivian Langford, the most senior among them, spoke first. The video is pretty damning, Preston. He didn't create anything. Your buddy Von Harlan is clearly visible, demanding the seat. The video shows a fraction of what happened, Preston countered. Thompson was disruptive before filming started. Ask the crew. And will they corroborate that story under oath? Vivian pressed. Preston ignored the question, pivoting to his prepared talking points. Here's what concerns me. Pinnacle Investments has a history of targeting transportation companies, creating controversy, then acquiring them at depressed values. They did it with Midwest Railroads last year. This caught the board's attention. Preston displayed slides showing Pinnacle's acquisition history, carefully curated to suggest a predatory pattern. Marcus Thompson isn't some innocent victim, Preston continued. He's a financial shark exploiting racial tensions to weaken us. His ultimate goal isn't investing, it's taking control of Sky West. By afternoon, Preston's narrative began seeping into financial news coverage. A Bloomberg analyst questioned Pinnacle's opportunistic tactics. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile examining Darius's aggressive acquisition strategy. Preston didn't stop there. He contacted Von Harlan, who sat on the boards of several companies where Pinnacle sought investment opportunities. Make some calls, Preston instructed. Let people know Thompson is unreliable, emotional, playing the race card to cover for financial weakness. Vaughn readily agreed. Within hours, rumors circulated through exclusive country clubs and private dining rooms that Pinnacle faced liquidity problems, that Darius's emotional reaction suggested instability. 3 potential Pinnacle clients suddenly postponed scheduled meetings. A major bank placed their pending loan agreement under additional review. Darius observed these developments with calm calculation. He'd anticipated Preston's counterattack. It followed the predictable playbook used against minorities who challenged power structures. His team reported each new rumor, each canceled meeting, each subtle shift in the financial community's reception. Darius listened without surprise. They're saying Pinnacle is over-leveraged, Nia reported during their evening briefing. 2 hedge funds have reduced their positions in our managed funds. Preston's fingerprints are all over this, Kai added. He's activating his network systematically. Darius nodded. Exactly as expected. How's our financial position? Rock solid, Nia confirmed. We've got contingency liquidity for precisely this scenario and the Sky West situation. Voss is desperate. Kai reported their Q2 projections required your investment. Without it, they'll miss earnings targets catastrophically. Darius opened his laptop, reviewing a secure folder labeled Caldwell Files. His investigators had been busy compiling Preston's history of discriminatory behavior. 5 separate incidents of black executives being undermined, reassigned, or forced out. 2 female VPs who'd left after interactions with Preston. Multiple complaints buried through settlements with non-disclosure agreements. But the most damning evidence had arrived that afternoon. Security camera footage from the Sky West gate showing Preston explicitly instructing the crew to remove Darius from his seat. As Darius reviewed these materials, his secure phone line rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Thompson, this is Kendra Hayes, the flight attendant from yesterday's flight." Darius straightened. "Miss Hayes, I appreciate you reaching out. What they did was wrong," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Caldwell ordered us to remove you specifically. He said to create a disturbance if necessary, anything to get you out of first class before takeoff. Are you willing to provide a statement confirming this?" A pause. "I could lose my job." "I understand the risk," Darius acknowledged, "but this is bigger than one incident or one company." Kendra hesitated. "Can I think about it? They're monitoring us closely right now." "Of course. My legal team can ensure you're protected if you decide to come forward." After the call, Darius received an urgent alert from his security team. Threat assessment elevated. Multiple doxing attempts detected. Racial slurs and threats appearing on fringe forums. Recommend enhanced security protocols. Preston's counteroffensive had expanded beyond financial circles. Hate groups had picked up the story, casting Darius as a threat to traditional American business values. Death threats arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters. Darius's home address was posted online. His elderly mother received harassing calls. That evening, Preston seemed to gain the upper hand. A financial blog published doctored photos appearing to show Darius acting aggressively on the flight. Though quickly debunked, the images spread widely on certain platforms. Simultaneously, Preston accessed Pinnacle's confidential client data through a sophisticated corporate espionage operation, identifying vulnerable relationships he could target. Darius received the most alarming news just before midnight. Security breach detected. Caldwell accessing private Pinnacle files through third-party contractor. Sensitive client information compromised. Preston had crossed into illegal territory. A desperate move from someone who sensed he was losing control. Darius called an emergency meeting with his executive team. "Preston's getting reckless. He's breaking laws now. Should we involve federal authorities?" Kai asked. "Not yet," Darius replied. "Let's gather conclusive evidence first." That night, as Darius finally prepared for sleep, CNN Breaking News announced Sky West CEO issues statement supporting VP Preston Caldwell, questions motives behind viral video. Voss had chosen sides. The corporate machine was closing ranks. What initially seemed like a clear case of discrimination caught on video was being systematically reframed as a calculated attack by Darius. The playbook was familiar. Discredit the victim. Question their motives. Protect the system. Darius turned off the television, oddly calm. He'd expected this phase. The moment when power structures reveal their self-protective reflexes. "Your move, Preston," he murmured to the darkened room. "Keep digging your hole deeper." Dawn found Darius already at work in a secure conference room he'd established in a different hotel. He'd relocated overnight as a security precaution, leaving no digital trail. The room now functioned as Pinnacle's command center for Operation Accountability, their internal code name for the Sky West response. "Good morning, team." Darius greeted his assembled specialists as they connected through encrypted video conference. "Status updates, please." Lena Wong, head of Pinnacle's newly formed investigative unit, began. We've identified 17 former Sky West employees who experienced discrimination under Preston Caldwell's leadership. 7 are willing to speak on record. Excellent. Darius nodded. Kai, legal position. Kai Lung, appearing slightly disheveled after working through the night, straightened his tie. We've documented 46 regulatory violations at Sky West over the past 3 years, all under Preston's operational oversight. FAA filing prepared if needed. Darius turned to his cybersecurity expert. Arjun, where are we on the data breach? Confirmed. Caldwell used Clearview Securities to access our systems. Arjun reported they targeted client files specifically. We've secured everything and implemented honeypot traps. Fake datasets they'll think are valuable, but will actually help us trace their activities. Perfect. Darius approved. And Nia, his COO, appeared on screen from Pinnacle's New York headquarters. Financial containment proceeding well. Caldwell's whisper campaign damaged us with 3 clients, but we've retained 18 others after direct outreach. Our liquidity position remains strong. As the meeting progressed, Darius received a text from an unknown number. Need to talk. Not safe on phone. Coffee shop across from hotel. 30 minutes. K.H. Kendra Hayes. After concluding the meeting, Darius contacted his security team. I need a public location sweep and escort. Possible informant meeting. 20 minutes later, with security personnel positioned discreetly around the coffee shop, Darius sat at a corner table, back to the wall with clear sight lines to all entrances. Kendra arrived looking exhausted, constantly glancing over her shoulder. She slid into the seat across from him without ordering. I can't stay long, she began, voice barely above a whisper. They're watching us. Flight crew who might support you are being reassigned to international routes, effectively silenced. Thank you for taking this risk, Darius said sincerely. Kendra placed a USB drive on the table. It's all here. Recordings of Preston's instructions before your flight, documentation of other incidents, internal emails about passenger reclassification based on appearance. Her hand trembled. There's a pattern. It's not just you. This is incredibly brave, Kendra. They're trying to buy my silence, she confessed. Preston offered a promotion to international first-class routes if I sign a statement saying you were disruptive. And if you don't sign, I'll be downsized in the next round of cuts. She checked her watch nervously. I have to go. My supervisor thinks I'm at a doctor's appointment. As Kendra rose to leave, she added, check the recording from March 15th. Invaluable. Detailed documentation of invaluable. Detailed documentation of numerous discrimination incidents, all bearing Preston Caldwell's digital fingerprints. Most damning was a recording of Preston instructing Kendra before Darius's flight. I don't care what his boarding pass says. Find a reason to move him. Vaughn Harlan needs that seat, and he doesn't want to sit next to, well, you know, make it happen. Darius's team worked methodically, correlating Kendra's evidence with complaints they'd independently gathered. A clear pattern emerged. At least 9 instances where non-white passengers with first-class tickets had been reaccommodated when certain VIPs requested their seats. By mid-afternoon, Darius received a concerning update from his security team. Subject Caldwell has contacted Clearview Securities again. Surveillance indicates possible targeting of Hayes Kendra. Darius immediately dispatched protection for Kendra and alerted her to the threat. Hours later, his caution proved justified when Kendra called, badly shaken. Someone broke into my apartment, she reported. Nothing taken, but my personal files were searched and my work laptop is missing. Are you safe now? Yes, Your security team arrived quickly. They're relocating me." Meanwhile, Preston grew increasingly desperate. Having failed to silence Kendra, he attempted to bribe another flight attendant who had witnessed the incident. When that failed, he resorted to more extreme measures. Late that evening, Darius's lead investigator, Jamal Brooks, was driving back from interviewing a former Sky West executive when an SUV forced him off the road. He escaped with minor injuries, but the message was clear. The stakes had escalated beyond professional reputations. This wasn't random, Jamal insisted from his hospital bed, a bandage covering his forehead laceration. The driver knew exactly who I was and what I was working on. Darius flew Jamal's family in for support and doubled security for everyone involved in the investigation. What had begun as a case of discrimination had evolved into something more sinister. The next morning, Darius received a call from Harlan Voss. "Darius, this has gone far enough," Voss began, his voice betraying stress. "Let's resolve this situation like businessmen. Sky West is prepared to offer you a seat on our board, plus a substantial settlement if you'll release the frozen funds and sign an NDA. Harlan, this stopped being a business matter the moment your VP endangered my safety," Darius replied. "Now it's about accountability." Preston made a mistake. Not a mistake, a choice. One he's made repeatedly based on the evidence we've gathered. Voss's tone hardened. Evidence or a disgruntled employee with an agenda? Multiple employees, multiple incidents, plus security footage, emails, and recordings, Darius countered. The pattern is undeniable. These allegations could seriously damage. They already have, Harlan, and they'll continue to until you address the root cause. After hanging up, Darius noticed a new development online. Preston had apparently decided on a public reversal of strategy. Sky West released a statement claiming their internal investigation had revealed Darius was disruptive and had voluntarily moved to economy after being offered compensation. This blatant lie might have worked in the pre-social media era, but dozens of passengers had filmed the incident, and their footage contradicted every aspect of Sky West's statement. The airline's credibility collapsed further as independent journalists began connecting the dots between Darius's case and other discrimination incidents. Preston's history of problematic behavior became front-page news. Yet, Preston remained defiant, telling CNBC, "This is a targeted campaign by Pinnacle Investments to devalue Sky West for acquisition. Darius Thompson is playing the race card to distract from his predatory business tactics." That evening, as Darius reviewed the day's developments, he received an unexpected message from Vivian Langford, the senior Sky West board member. "This has gone too far. Some of us want to talk privately." For the first time since the incident, Darius sensed a fracture in Sky West's united front. Preston's increasingly reckless tactics were alienating his own allies. "Gather everyone," Darius instructed his team. "It's time to present our evidence to select board members. Preston's making critical errors. Let's capitalize on them. We're live in 5, 4, 3. The producer silently mouthed the final countdown as Darius Thompson sat across from veteran news anchor Sophia Grant in CNN's studio. The red light illuminated on the camera, and Sophia turned to face the viewing audience of millions. "Good evening. Tonight, we're joined by Darius Thompson, CEO of Pinnacle Investments, who found himself at the center of a viral discrimination incident aboard a Sky West Airlines flight last week. Mr. Thompson, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me, Sophia," Darius replied. His posture relaxed, yet dignified in his perfectly tailored navy suit. For those who haven't seen the video, though at nearly 30 million views, that's increasingly few people. Can you walk us through what happened? With measured precision, Darius recounted the events, neither embellishing nor downplaying the humiliation he'd experienced. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the outrageous treatment he described. What's most concerning, he concluded, is that this wasn't an isolated incident. We've uncovered a pattern of similar discrimination at Sky West, particularly involving Preston Caldwell, their VP of operations. Sky West has claimed you were being disruptive, Sophia noted. How do you respond? The videos speak for themselves, Darius replied simply. Multiple passengers recorded the incident from different angles. None show any disruptive behavior on my part. And the financial aspect. You've frozen a $25 million payment to Sky West. Yes, Pinnacle cannot in good conscience invest in a company that permits systemic discrimination. We've presented Sky West with specific structural changes required before we proceed with our investment. As the interview continued, Darius struck a perfect balance. Professional, yet passionate. Firm, yet reasonable. He didn't appear angry or vindictive, but rather determined to create meaningful change. The impact was immediate. #HoldSkyWest. Accountable began trending before the interview even concluded. Sky West's stock, which had briefly stabilized that morning, plunged another 8% in after-hours trading. Back in his hotel room, Darius watched as major corporate clients publicly suspended their Sky West contracts. The airline's once reliable government contracts came under review. Travel sites added consumer warnings to Sky West bookings. His phone rang. Nia, with an update. Your interview destroyed them. Voss's office has been calling every 15 minutes. The board is in emergency session. And Preston? Doubling down. He scheduled his own interview tomorrow morning on Fox Business. Darius nodded to himself. Perfect. Let him keep talking. The following morning, Preston Caldwell appeared on screen dressed in an expensive but slightly ill-fitting suit. His complexion flushed despite professional makeup. This is a calculated attack, Preston insisted when asked about the incident. Darius Thompson deliberately created this situation to lower our stock value. Pinnacle has a history of these tactics, the interviewer pressed. But the video clearly shows. The video doesn't show what happened before filming started, Preston interrupted. Thompson was argumentative with our crew. He refused reasonable accommodation offers. When questioned about the discrimination allegations, Preston became defensive. I find it offensive that any time a person of color doesn't get exactly what they want, they immediately claim discrimination. Sky West has an exemplary diversity record. The performance was disastrous. Preston appeared evasive, entitled, and increasingly agitated. By contrast, Darius' composed interview continued gaining positive attention across the political spectrum. Sky West's crisis deepened hourly. Preston's Fox interview spawned new memes and video compilations contrasting his claims with footage from the plane. Celebrity influencers voiced support for Darius. A major civil rights organization announced plans to investigate Sky West's practices. By midday, Sky West's market capitalization had lost over $800 million since the incident began, more than 6 times Darius's frozen investment. Yet, Preston wasn't finished. Through his country club connections, he planted a story in the New York Post suggesting Darius had a sealed criminal record. Though completely fabricated, the story gained traction in certain circles. They're getting desperate, Kai observed during their strategy call. But it's having some impact. 2 institutional investors called asking about these rumors. Darius remained unfazed. Expected. Preston's following the classic playbook. When facts aren't on your side, attack the victim's character. His media team monitored the situation carefully, noting which outlets amplified Preston's false claims and which pursued factual reporting. They strategically released supporting evidence to trusted journalists, gradually building an irrefutable public case. Another opportunity presented itself when a prominent black business podcast requested Darius as a guest. Rather than focusing solely on the incident, Darius used the platform to discuss broader issues of discrimination in corporate America and his vision for change. "This isn't about one flight or one airline," he explained thoughtfully. "It's about accountability in spaces where discrimination has long been normalized. When I started Pinnacle, I committed to using our financial leverage for positive change. This is part of that mission." The podcast went viral, particularly among business students and young professionals. #BusinessForChange began trending with thousands sharing stories of discrimination they'd experienced or witnessed in corporate settings. Preston's counteroffensive continued deteriorating. His attempt to distract from the main issues with character attacks only heightened public interest in the evidence Darius's team was systematically releasing. The most damaging blow came when 3 major celebrities shared their own negative experiences on Sky West flights, specifically mentioning Preston Caldwell's involvement. Their combined social media reach exceeded 50 million followers. Sky West's corporate clients continued abandoning ship. Ticket sales plummeted. The company announced emergency cost-cutting measures, including route reductions and potential layoffs. Yet, the most troubling development for Darius was personal. His family began receiving threats. For all family members. But the emotional toll was significant. That night, for the first time since the incident began, doubt crept in. Was the cost of this principled stand becoming too high? A call from Terrence Hayes steadied him. "They're targeting your family because they're losing on the merits," his mentor observed. "This is how power protects itself, by making the personal cost of challenging it unbearable." "I know," Darius acknowledged, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Terrence replied. "Remember why you started Pinnacle in the first place?" Darius did remember. He'd founded Pinnacle not just to create wealth, but to transform spaces where people like him had traditionally been excluded. Each investment carried that mission. The next morning, Darius appeared at a press conference with the families of 7 other individuals who had experienced similar discrimination on Sky West flights. Their collective testimony painted a devastating picture of systematic bias. The media landscape had completely shifted. What Preston had tried to frame as one man's vengeful campaign was now clearly revealed as a pattern of corporate discrimination affecting dozens of people. That evening, Darius received word that several Sky West board members had requested private meetings separate from Voss or Preston. The tide was turning. Have you ever witnessed a company try to cover up wrongdoing instead of addressing it? Comment number 1, if you think corporations should be held accountable for discrimination. Hit that like button if you believe financial power can be used for positive social change. Subscribe to see how the Sky West board responds to the mounting pressure. What do you think will happen next? Will Preston finally face consequences for his actions? Or will corporate connections protect him once again? And how far will he go to silence those speaking out against him? The battle for justice is reaching its climax. The imposing federal courthouse dominated the skyline, its neoclassical columns standing as silent witnesses to countless battles for justice. Today, those columns would witness another, Sky West Airlines versus Pinnacle Investments, an emergency hearing on Sky West's motion to force the release of the frozen $25 million. Darius Thompson sat beside his legal team, watching as Sky West's attorneys arranged their materials at the opposing table. Preston Caldwell and Harlan Voss occupied prime positions behind their lawyers, Preston leaning forward to whisper instructions. While Voss appeared increasingly haggard, Judge Sterling Voss entered, a Reagan appointee with 30 years on the bench. His reputation for strict adherence to contract law had initially concerned Darius's team. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Sterling Voss presiding. Sky West's lead counsel, Brooke Landon, rose first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward contract dispute. Pinnacle Investments signed a binding agreement to provide capital investment to Sky West Airlines. The initial payment of $25 million was processed, then illegally reversed by Mr. Thompson in a vindictive response to a minor customer service issue." Judge Voss peered over his glasses. "And the basis for freezing the funds, Mr. Leung?" Kai Leung stood. "Force majeure, Your Honor. The contract contained standard provisions allowing suspension of obligations under extraordinary circumstances." Mr. Thompson was physically removed from his rightful seat based on racial discrimination by Sky West executives, specifically Mr. Caldwell, creating conditions that fundamentally altered the relationship between the parties. Brooke Landon scoffed. "Hardly force majeure." Mr. Thompson was politely reaccommodated following standard airline protocols. He's attempting to leverage an ordinary flight incident into contractual advantage. Judge Voss frowned. "Ms. Landon, I've seen the videos like everyone else. That was no ordinary incident. However, the question before this court is whether it constitutes grounds for withholding contractually obligated funds." For the next 2 hours, arguments flew back and forth. Sky West presented carefully selected testimony from flight attendants who claimed Darius had been uncooperative. They submitted statements from passengers who hadn't witnessed the beginning of the confrontation but heard raised voices. When Preston Caldwell took the stand, he projected confident authority. "Mr. Thompson has manufactured this controversy to extort concessions from Sky West." He testified smoothly. "Our flight crew made a routine seating adjustment based on operational needs." Mr. Thompson became confrontational, necessitating security involvement. During cross-examination, Kai methodically dismantled Preston's narrative, highlighting inconsistencies between his testimony and the video evidence. Yet, Judge Voss seemed unmoved, asking questions that suggested sympathy with Sky West's position. As Darius watched, he noticed subtle exchanges between Preston and the judge. A shared glance, a slight nod. Something felt off. During a recess, Darius whispered to Kai, "The judge knows Preston." Kai nodded imperceptibly. "Research team just confirmed. Same country club. Voss's son interned at Sky West last summer in Preston's department. Should we request recusal?" Too late. It would antagonize him further. Best strategy now is to build an ironclad record for appeal. When proceedings resumed, Sky West's legal team introduced a new claim. They presented doctored email chains suggesting Darius had planned to withhold payment regardless of his flight experience. "Objection," Kai called. "These documents are fabricated." "Strong accusation, Counselor," Judge Voss admonished. "Do you have proof?" "We can present metadata evidence showing these emails were created yesterday," Kai replied. Judge Voss waved dismissively. "Submit your technical evidence later. For now, these documents are admitted." By late afternoon, the pattern was unmistakable. Judge Voss systematically favored Sky West's arguments while finding procedural reasons to exclude Pinnacle's strongest evidence. Then came the most damaging blow. The judge ruled that Kendra Hayes's testimony was inadmissible on a technicality. Her employment contract contained an arbitration clause that Sky West argued prevented her from testifying in federal court. Without Kendra's direct account of Preston's instructions, Darius's case weakened substantially. Kai fought valiantly against each adverse ruling, but Judge Voss seemed determined to rule for Sky West. As the court day ended, Judge Voss announced, "I'll issue my ruling tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Based on today's proceedings, I'm inclined to grant Sky West's motion and order the immediate release of funds." The courtroom began emptying. Preston caught Darius's eye across the room, his expression triumphant. "Nothing personal," he mouthed silently, his smile revealing it was, in fact, deeply personal. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Voss made a brief statement expressing confidence in the legal process, while Preston added, "Truth prevails over social media manipulation." Sky West looks forward to putting this manufactured controversy behind us. In his legal team's temporary war room at a nearby hotel, Darius absorbed the implications. If Voss rules against us tomorrow, what's our exposure? Kai grimaced. Beyond the 25 million, there's potential for damages, legal fees, and reputational harm. More concerning, it creates precedent that could undermine discrimination cases industry-wide. Darius paced the room, thinking through options. If the system is rigged, we need to change the venue. Appeal will take months, Kai cautioned. I'm not talking about legal venues. Darius turned to Naya. Prepare for maximum media transparency. If Voss rules against us, we release everything. All evidence, all testimony, all connections between Preston and the judge. That's nuclear, Kai warned. It could backfire. So be it, Darius replied. This stopped being about money the moment they called security to remove me from that seat. Later that night, as Darius reviewed court transcripts, his phone rang. An unlisted number. Mr. Thompson, it's Vivian Langford from Sky West's board. Miss Langford, bold of you to call during active litigation. This has gone too far, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Several of us on the board just learned about Preston's connection to Judge Voss. We didn't authorize this manipulation, yet you benefited from it today, Darius observed. Some victories aren't worth their cost, Vivian replied cryptically. Check your email in 15 minutes. The email arrived exactly on schedule. Internal Sky West communications revealing Preston had personally selected Judge Voss's courtroom through procedural maneuvers along with evidence of their long-standing personal relationship. Darius immediately forwarded everything to Kai, who called within minutes. This changes everything, Kai said. We can file for emergency recusal first thing tomorrow. Too late for tomorrow's ruling. Probably, Kai admitted, but perfect for appeal and potentially for a judicial misconduct investigation. Darius ended the call, staring out his hotel window at the city lights. Tomorrow's ruling would likely go against Pinnacle, a tactical loss strategically engineered by Preston Caldwell. Across town, Preston was undoubtedly celebrating his apparent victory. But in the complex chess game they were playing, Darius had just gained something far more valuable than a favorable ruling. He'd exposed corruption at the heart of the system Preston relied upon for protection. The real battle was just beginning. The ruling came down exactly as expected. Judge Voss ordered the immediate release of the frozen funds, plus punitive damages for contractual interference. His written opinion contained language that could have been drafted by Sky West's legal team, dismissing discrimination claims as opportunistic leverage tactics. Preston Caldwell's victory lap began immediately. Sky West's PR team issued triumphant statements about vindication and justice served. Financial analysts upgraded the airline stock, which rebounded 7% by midday. Preston himself appeared on CNBC, projecting gracious magnanimity. While we're pleased with the court's decision, Sky West remains committed to addressing any legitimate concerns about our customer service, he stated smoothly. We hope Mr. Thompson will now honor his contractual obligations so both companies can move forward productively. The carefully crafted narrative seemed to be working. Market sentiment shifted perceptibly as commentators questioned whether the viral incident had been overblown. Several publications ran features examining trial by social media and the dangers of rushing to judgment. Darius watched these developments from a secure location, having moved again after receiving credible security threats. His team had anticipated this shift and prepared accordingly. Judge Voss gave them exactly what they wanted, Kai reported. We've already filed our appeal and judicial misconduct complaint. How long until those are heard? Darius asked. Months, potentially. The system works slowly, which benefits those already in power. Darius nodded thoughtfully. Then we accelerate. Their strategic pivot began subtly. First, Darius's team released documentation of Judge Voss's connections to Preston Caldwell, not through press statements, but through secure channels to trusted investigative journalists. The evidence included photographs of them golfing together weeks before the hearing and records of text messages discussing the case. By evening, judicial ethics experts were appearing on news programs, questioning the legitimacy of Voss's ruling. The legal victory Preston had been celebrating suddenly appeared tainted. But the true turning point came unexpectedly. As Darius reviewed strategy with his team, his secure line rang. Kendra Hayes. They're coming after me, she began without preamble, her voice shaking. Preston offered me a promotion to international routes if I sign a statement contradicting my previous testimony. When I refused, he threatened to fire me for performance issues they suddenly discovered. Are you safe? Darius asked immediately. For now. But there's more. Preston approached another flight attendant, Sophia Ramirez, with the same offer. She recorded him. Explicit threats, explicit instructions to lie about what happened on your flight. Is she willing to come forward? Yes, but she's terrified. Preston told her he has friends in law enforcement who could cause problems for her brother, who has a minor record. We can provide protection for both of you, Darius assured her. My security team will contact you within the hour. By midnight, Kendra Hayes and Sophia Ramirez had been relocated to secure accommodations. Sophia's recording of Preston's intimidation attempt was devastating. Clear evidence of witness tampering, a federal offense. The next morning, Darius's team made their boldest move yet. Rather than releasing the recording through media channels, they submitted it directly to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, along with comprehensive documentation of Preston's pattern of discrimination, witness intimidation, and now evidence of judicial tampering. Simultaneously, they connected Kendra with producers from 60 Minutes, who had been investigating airline industry discrimination for months. The resulting interview was scheduled to air Sunday evening. Maximum viewership for maximum impact. Preston, sensing the shifting momentum, grew increasingly desperate. Through his connections, he gained access to Pinnacle's confidential client database, planting evidence suggesting financial irregularities in Darius's dealings with federal contracts. Within hours, an anonymous whistleblower had filed complaints with the SEC and FBI, triggering preliminary investigations into Pinnacle's business practices. News of these investigations leaked strategically to financial media, creating renewed pressure on Darius's company. What Preston hadn't anticipated was that Darius had expected precisely this move. Months earlier, foreseeing potential battles with entrenched interests, Darius had implemented extraordinary security protocols for all Pinnacle systems. Each access attempt, each file interaction, was meticulously logged with blockchain verification. The fabricated evidence Preston planted was digitally watermarked through these security measures, creating irrefutable proof of corporate espionage and false reporting to federal agencies, both serious felonies. As the 60 Minutes interview approached, tension escalated dramatically. Kendra received anonymous threats warning her against appearing. Sophia's brother was suddenly arrested on a minor traffic violation and held without bail. Preston thought he was sending warnings. Instead, he was building the case against himself. The Sunday broadcast proved catastrophic for Sky West. Kendra Hayes, poised and credible, detailed Preston's systematic discrimination policies. Sophia Ramirez played the damning recording of his intimidation attempts. 6 other former employees shared similar experiences, creating an overwhelming picture of a toxic culture emanating directly from Preston Caldwell. The final segment featured an aerospace industry expert analyzing Sky West's safety record under Preston's operational leadership, identifying concerning patterns of cost-cutting that potentially compromised passenger safety. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Sky West's stock plummeted 20% in pre-market trading. Major institutional shareholders issued statements demanding board action. The hashtag boycott Sky West trended globally. More significantly, the FBI confirmed an active investigation into allegations of witness tampering and obstruction of justice related to recent litigation involving Sky West Airlines. Preston responded with his most desperate gambit yet. Through manipulated evidence and his law enforcement connections, he orchestrated a raid on Pinnacle's New York offices based on the fabricated financial irregularities he'd planted. The images of FBI agents removing boxes from Pinnacle headquarters hit financial news within minutes of the raid beginning. Pinnacle stock dropped precipitously as investors reacted to the apparent confirmation of wrongdoing. Darius, who had anticipated even this extreme tactic, remained calm. "Let the process play out," he instructed his concerned executive team. "We've documented everything. The truth will emerge." But privately, he recognized the escalating stakes. Preston had moved beyond professional combat into potential criminal territory. The risk to Darius's company, reputation, and personal freedom had grown exponentially. That evening, as Darius prepared for an emergency investor call to address the raid, breaking news flashed across his screen. Sky West executive Preston Caldwell named as target in federal corruption probe. The FBI, upon examining the evidence Darius had submitted, had quickly recognized the planted nature of the evidence against Pinnacle. The investigation had pivoted to focus on Preston's actions. Within hours, the narrative completely reversed. Financial News analyzed how Preston had apparently manipulated federal agencies to target a business rival. Legal experts discussed the potential charges: witness tampering, obstruction of justice, corporate espionage, false statements to federal investigators. As dawn broke, Darius received word that Harlan Voss had called an emergency board meeting at Sky West. The walls were closing in on Preston Caldwell, but Preston had one final card to play. One last desperate attempt to silence his accusers. Darius Thompson stood before Pinnacle's assembled employees, projecting calm confidence despite the company's tumultuous week. The FBI had publicly clarified that Pinnacle was not the target of their investigation. But the market remained jittery, their stock still down 12%. "I know the past few days have created uncertainty," Darius acknowledged, "but I can assure you, Pinnacle stands on solid ground, both financially and ethically." What we're experiencing is the backlash that often comes when challenging entrenched power. As he spoke, his chief security officer approached discreetly, passing him a handwritten note. Offshore accounts discovered. Caldwell moving assets. Call immediately. Darius concluded his remarks and retreated to his office, where his investigative team waited with extraordinary findings. We followed the money. Lena Wong began without preamble. Preston Caldwell has been operating a complex network of offshore accounts for over a decade. Most significantly, he holds a concealed 5% ownership stake in Clearview Securities, the same firm he hired for corporate espionage against us. That creates a direct financial connection to the illegal access of our systems, Darius observed. Exactly. But there's more. We've identified payments from Caldwell's Cayman accounts to individuals connected to recent intimidation attempts against Kendra Hayes and Sofia Ramirez. Criminal conspiracy, Kai noted. Federal prosecutors will be very interested. The evidence was comprehensive. Caldwell had maintained meticulously hidden financial structures to conceal conflicts of interest, kickbacks from vendors, and payments for various forms of coercion. His apparent wealth came not just from his Sky West salary, but from systematically exploiting his position for personal gain. Most damning is this, Lena continued, displaying financial records. Caldwell received substantial payments coinciding with Sky West decisions to deny promotions to minority executives who filed discrimination complaints. He was being paid to maintain the status quo. Darius realized to keep certain people out of leadership. The team compiled their findings into a comprehensive report, which they provided simultaneously to the FBI, SEC, and Department of Justice. The evidence was too substantial, too well documented to ignore. Meanwhile, at Sky West headquarters, Preston Caldwell was fighting for his professional life. The emergency board meeting had stretched into its 6th hour, with Preston maintaining his innocence against mounting evidence. This is a calculated attack by Thompson. Preston insisted he's manipulating federal agencies, just like he manipulated social media. Vivian Langford, who had emerged as Preston's most vocal critic on the board, responded coldly. The FBI doesn't launch investigations based on Twitter trends. Preston, they have evidence. Evidence you've been unable to refute. This company stood by you through the initial incident, Harlan Voss added, his former ally now visibly distancing himself. We accepted your explanation that Thompson was being difficult. We supported you through the public backlash, but witness intimidation, offshore accounts. This goes far beyond a seating dispute. As pressure mounted in the boardroom, Preston's composure began cracking. His carefully constructed professional persona, polished, measured, authoritative, gave way to flashes of the raw entitlement and anger that had driven his actions against Darius. You have no idea what it takes to keep an airline running, he shouted at one point. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary. Sometimes people get upset, but we do what needs to be done. The board watched in stunned silence as Preston's true character emerged. Is that what this was about? Vivian asked quietly, making difficult decisions about who belongs in first class based on their appearance. Outside the boardroom, the situation deteriorated further. Kendra Hayes appeared on multiple news programs, joined by an expanding group of current and former Sky West employees testifying to systematic discrimination. Their stories were specific, credible, and devastating. One former executive detailed how Preston had blocked her promotion, explicitly stating, "Our premium customers aren't comfortable with certain types in leadership positions." A ground operations manager described Preston's instructions to give extra scrutiny to passengers who don't look like they belong in first class. The cumulative effect was overwhelming. Sky West's market capitalization had lost over $1 billion. Major corporate clients had suspended their contracts indefinitely. The Department of Transportation announced a comprehensive review of the airline's compliance with anti-discrimination regulations. Preston's position became untenable when financial news outlets began reporting on his offshore accounts and hidden conflicts of interest. Questions about potential criminal exposure created liability, concerns the board couldn't ignore. "We need to address this immediately," Voss announced, ending hours of deliberation. "The board will vote on Preston's termination for cause." Sensing defeat, Preston made a final desperate play. "If I go down, I'm not going alone." He pulled out his phone, displaying emails and text messages. Harlan knew everything. He approved my handling of passenger reassignments years ago. He specifically told me to keep Thompson out of first class that day. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Voss vehemently denied the allegations, while Preston produced increasingly damning communications showing leadership's complicity in discriminatory practices. As the board descended into accusatory chaos, federal agents arrived with warrants to search Preston's office and electronic devices. Tipped off by a sympathetic executive assistant, Preston attempted to delete incriminating files and communications before they could be seized. This desperate act of evidence destruction was captured by security cameras, providing prosecutors with clear obstruction of justice charges regardless of the underlying investigation's outcome. By evening, the situation had reached its breaking point. The board voted unanimously to terminate Preston Caldwell for cause, effective immediately. Sky West issued a public statement distancing itself from his actions and pledging full cooperation with federal investigators. Darius received this news while meeting with his expanded legal team to coordinate their response to the rapidly evolving situation. The termination represented a significant victory, but fell far short of the structural change required. "They're scapegoating Preston to save the institution," Darius observed. "Same playbook we've seen countless times. Sacrifice one person while protecting the system that enabled them." His suspicions were confirmed when Harlan Voss held a press conference characterizing Preston as a rogue executive whose actions in no way reflected Sky West's values or policies. "I find it telling," Darius commented to his team, "that Voss is more outraged by Preston's financial improprieties than by his systematic discrimination. One threatened the company's money, the other merely harmed human beings." As Preston Caldwell faced the professional and legal consequences of his actions, Darius focused on the bigger picture. Preston was a symptom of a deeper disease, a corporate culture that tolerated or even rewarded discrimination as long as it remained discreet. "We don't just want Preston Caldwell removed," Darius told his team. "We want systems that prevent the next Preston Caldwell from gaining power in the first place." The final revelation came unexpectedly. Among the documents federal agents seized from Preston's office was a confidential memo from Harlan Voss dated 3 years earlier, outlining a passenger comfort strategy that included specific protocols for managing cabin demographics on premium routes. Voss had not merely tolerated Preston's discriminatory practices. He had helped create them. 6 weeks after the incident that sparked the controversy, Darius Thompson stood before a very different Sky West board. Gone was Preston Caldwell, now facing federal charges for witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and financial crimes. Gone, too, was Harlan Voss, forced to resign after his role in establishing discriminatory policies became public. Vivian Langford, elevated to interim CEO, had requested this meeting personally. Beside her sat 5 new board members appointed as part of Sky West's comprehensive restructuring. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Mr. Thompson," Vivian began. We've spent weeks conducting an unflinching examination of Sky West's culture and practices. What we found was deeply troubling. Systemic issues far beyond one executive's actions. She slid a document across the table. Sky West's newly adopted anti-discrimination and inclusion framework, a comprehensive overhaul of hiring, promotion, training, and customer service protocols. This represents our commitment to meaningful change, Vivian continued. We've established measurable benchmarks, transparent reporting, and executive compensation tied directly to diversity outcomes. Darius reviewed the document carefully. It contained many of the specific reforms he'd proposed, plus additional measures developed through consultation with civil rights organizations and industry experts. Impressive, he acknowledged, but policies are only as effective as their implementation. Which is why we're here, Vivian replied. Sky West is formally requesting that Pinnacle reconsider its investment position under substantially revised terms. The new proposal outlined a transformed relationship. Pinnacle would receive expanded equity stake and board representation, including permanent seats on Sky West's ethics and compensation committees. Most significantly, the airline would establish an independent oversight council with authority to investigate discrimination complaints and recommend binding remedial actions. This isn't just about your capital investment, Vivian explained. We need partners who will hold us accountable during this transformation. Who better than the person who exposed our failures so publicly? Darius studied the faces around the table. Where Preston and Harlan had projected entitlement and condescension, these executives showed something unfamiliar in his dealings with Sky West: genuine humility. I'll need time to review these terms with my team, Darius replied, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the direction you're taking. The following days brought further evidence of Sky West's commitment to change. The airline announced comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all employees developed in partnership with leading civil rights organizations. They established a substantial victim compensation fund for passengers who had experienced discriminatory treatment. Most notably, they promoted Kendra Hayes to a newly created position leading diversity and inclusion initiatives across the company. 3 months after the original incident, Darius found himself in a different first-class cabin. This time on a Sky West flight, where he'd been personally invited to experience the airline's transformed service approach. As he settled into his seat, he noticed subtle but significant changes. Diverse flight attendants in premium cabins, inclusive imagery in the company magazine, a new customer bill of rights prominently displayed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson." The flight attendant greeted him warmly. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." The sincere welcome represented more than personal recognition. It symbolized a fundamental shift in culture, the beginning of necessary transformation across an entire industry. Later that week, Darius finalized the renewed investment agreement with Sky West, now expanded to $150 million. The deal made headlines throughout the financial and transportation sectors, not just for its size, but for its groundbreaking governance provisions. This represents a new model for corporate accountability, Darius explained during the signing ceremony. Pinnacle believes financial investment should drive positive social transformation, not merely economic returns. In the aftermath, Darius established the Corporate Accountability Foundation, dedicated to fighting discrimination across industries. Funded with $10 million of his personal wealth, the foundation provided legal support for employees and customers facing similar situations while advocating for structural reforms in corporate America. The foundation's first initiative supported a class action lawsuit against another major airline with documented patterns of discrimination. Within months, that airline announced preemptive reforms rather than risk the kind of public reckoning Sky West had experienced. Preston Caldwell's legal troubles mounted as federal investigations expanded beyond the initial charges. Prosecutors discovered his discrimination practices extended to hiring and vendor selection, with qualified minority candidates and businesses systematically excluded. He eventually accepted a plea agreement carrying substantial financial penalties and prison time. Harlan Voss fared somewhat better legally, though his professional reputation never recovered. His memo outlining passenger comfort strategies became a case study in how corporate euphemisms often mask discriminatory intent. For Darius, the most meaningful outcome wasn't punitive, but transformative. Sky West's painful public reckoning had triggered industry-wide self-examination. Major airlines reviewed their policies, enhanced training, and established clear anti-discrimination protocols. Passengers of color reported measurable improvements in their treatment across multiple carriers. 1 year after the incident, Darius boarded another Sky West flight, this time as the newly appointed chairman of their expanded board. The position represented the culmination of his strategy, using financial leverage to gain governance authority and drive sustainable change from within. As he moved through the terminal, Darius passed a diverse group of pilot trainees in Sky West uniforms, part of the airline's new initiative to address historic underrepresentation in technical roles. Several nodded respectfully, recognizing the man whose stand against discrimination had helped create their opportunities. Settling into his seat, Darius reflected on the journey that had brought him here. What began as a humiliating moment of discrimination had catalyzed meaningful change across an entire industry. The financial power he'd built throughout his career had proven effective not just for creating wealth, but for dismantling barriers that had persisted for generations. His phone buzzed with a notification. Judge Sterling Voss had been removed from the federal bench following a judicial misconduct investigation stemming from his handling of the Sky West case. Another system of protection for the privileged had faced necessary accountability. As the plane ascended, Darius opened his laptop to review applications for the Corporate Accountability Foundation's newest initiative, a leadership development program for minority executives in transportation industries. The program would create pipelines for diverse talent to reach decision-making positions, ensuring the changes triggered by his experience would outlive any single case or company. The flight attendant approached with a genuine smile. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Chairman?" "Just a water." "Thank you," Darius replied, returning her smile. This time, she brought it in a proper glass filled to the top. Darius Thompson's story offers profound lessons about confronting racism in corporate America. First, it demonstrates how financial leverage can become a powerful tool for social change when wielded strategically. Darius didn't merely seek personal vindication. He recognized an opportunity to create systemic transformation across an entire industry. Second, the story highlights how discrimination often depends on systems of protection, from biased judges to complicit executives, that must be dismantled collectively. Third, we see that meaningful change requires more than removing problematic individuals. It demands restructuring the environments that enabled them. Perhaps most importantly, the narrative reminds us that accountability begins with documentation and evidence. Darius's methodical gathering of proof transformed a personal humiliation into an irrefutable case for reform. Finally, the resolution shows that true justice isn't merely punitive, but transformative, creating new pathways for those previously excluded. Real change happens when those with power use it not just for personal success, but to remake spaces where others like them have been systematically denied equal treatment and dignity. What moment in this story resonated most deeply with you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination that went unchallenged because of power imbalances? Comment below and share your thoughts. If you believe in using whatever influence you have to create positive change, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and accountability. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination operates and how it can be effectively challenged. Thank you for listening, and remember, justice isn't just about what happens in courtrooms. It's about the everyday choices we make to stand against discrimination when we see it.